Hey, what's up everyone? Bill Lethman here for Money Evolution. In today's video, I'm going to be helping you to answer the question, is my annuity any good? So here recently I've been recording a number of videos talking all about annuities. We've talked about the 4 different types of annuities. We've talked about the pros and the cons of purchasing an annuity. And we've also talked about where an annuity might fit into your overall strategy for creating retirement income. So here today in this video, I want to talk specifically to those of you that may already own an annuity. Maybe it's been a while since you bought that annuity. Maybe you haven't heard from the person who sold you the annuity in a while. Maybe you're concerned that it's not growing, or you're not sure about why you bought the annuity and about some of the benefits that that annuity is going to provide. So here in this video today, hopefully we're going to provide you some good information so that you can understand that existing annuity a little bit better, and also talk about some of the options that you have with that annuity and whether or not it makes sense to maybe change that annuity. Okay, so let's dive right in. So the first question that you want to ask yourself is, why did I buy this annuity? What was the original investment objective behind the purchase of that annuity? And number 1, do you still have that same investment objective? And then number 2 is the current annuity that you own the best way of meeting that investment objective? And that's what we're going to discuss here today. At the very end, we're going to talk about some considerations and some things that you need to be aware of before you get out of your annuity. So in my opinion, there's 4 primary reasons for purchasing an annuity. Number 1 is for some type of protection. Now, not all of the annuities offer this form of protection, but I think 2 annuities do it pretty well. Number 1 are fixed annuities. And fixed annuities, you can kind of think of them similarly to a CD at the bank. Basically, it's a situation where the annuity company pays you a fixed rate of interest over a specified period of time. And when evaluating a fixed annuity, it's pretty simple. Basically going to look at the interest rate that you're getting paid and compare that maybe to some of the other options that you would have if you were to change that annuity over to a new one. If the new rates are better than what you have, it could make sense for you to make that sort of a change. The second type of annuity is a fixed indexed annuity, which is really just a subset of the fixed annuity. But basically, this can offer some excellent principal protections as well. Of course, you want to be aware of some of the other aspects of owning an annuities like we've talked about in those other videos, such as fees. But basically, with a fixed indexed annuity, you're going to get an interest credited to you every year based on the underlying performance of an index. If that index is positive, you're going to get a positive rate of return up to some of the caps or the spreads that may exist within that annuity. But if the index is ever negative, usually you just get a credit of 0 for the year. So there's really no downside risk of principal loss with a fixed indexed annuity. If we're talking about variable annuities, those are going to be kind of similar to mutual funds, and those can do very well, but they could also lose value. So a variable annuity, if your primary objective is for principal protection, is probably not the best mechanism. The 4th type of annuity is one we don't talk about too often here because they're very, very restrictive, but they're what are called SPIAs, or single premium immediate annuities, and deferred income annuities. And that's basically where you're handing over all of your money to an insurance company. You get really no control over it. And really, once you're in those, you don't even have an option to change or do anything different. That's one of the primary reasons that we don't like those. So number 1 reason people buy annuities is for that principal protection, and we want to evaluate, is your annuity still the best option for you to get that sort of principal protection? Number 2 are income benefits. And I think this is probably a primary reason that most people purchase an annuity. So if you think about it, when we're all saving money for our retirement, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to grow that money over a period of time. And then ultimately, I think the goal for most of us is then to take that lump sum of money and then somehow convert that into some regular streams of income to last us for the rest of our life. And an annuity is really probably one of the best options for that ability to create that lifetime income. So in evaluating this, what you want to do is, number 1 is kind of, do I still need that income? Number 1, that's probably the primary question. But also 2, look at the annuity that you currently own and see, is that still the best option for me to create this long-term sustainability of income? In other words, are there other options out there that exist that may be better than what we have? And then again, we're going to talk at the end about the other considerations that you need to think about before you change an annuity. But basically, it comes down to just that one simple thing. Can I get more income by making some sort of a change? Number 3 is tax deferral. So this is quite honestly an investment objective for annuities that I'm not really that big of a fan of. But if your primary investment objective was just to delay paying taxes out to sometime in the future, I think that this is an investment objective that you really need to reevaluate. Like I talk about in some of the other videos, I believe that we're in right now a pretty low period of taxation, especially with the tax cuts that went into effect in 2018. And we're going to be in that low tax rate environment until the end of 2024. 25. After that, they're going to revert back up to those higher tax brackets. So one of the things to evaluate if that was your primary investment objective is kind of determining, what is my tax rate today versus what is that tax bracket going to be out in the future when I'm likely going to start taking that money out. And one important thing to understand when it comes to annuities is that any income that comes out of those annuities is taxed at your ordinary income tax rate. That's your highest federal marginal tax bracket. If you had that money in, let's say, a portfolio of stocks or ETFs or even mutual funds, and you got long-term capital gains or you got qualified dividends, those for most people watching this video are going to be taxed at 15%. And even if you are in one of those highest tax brackets, it only goes up to 20%. So still much less than what your federal marginal tax bracket is going to be. So really evaluate that. And is there a strategy potentially for you to get out of that annuity, pay the taxes now, and at a lower tax bracket rather than waiting till that future time when you might be in that higher bracket. And again, we're going to talk at the end. There's definitely some things to consider on this before you make that decision. What benefits you could be giving up? Are there death benefits or living benefits that also may be given up by making that change? But that's something you really want to evaluate. Is that still the primary investment objective? Okay, so the last reason that some people buy annuities is for death benefits, and some annuities also offer some long-term care benefits. And I don't think this is a very common one either. In fact, I'm not a big fan of this either in terms of the primary objective of buying the annuity. But again, just like the other types of reasons that people buy annuities, you want to evaluate, is that death benefit, is that still something that makes sense? You want to really understand how that death benefit works. There's some death benefits out there that appear to be very, very strong, where they might grow your base value at a compounded rate of return over a period of time. You say, hey, that's a great, maybe it's a 6% compounded rate of return, maybe it's even a 7% compounded rate of return. What a lot of times people don't fully understand when it comes to those death benefits is there's usually a maximum age that you reach where they no longer compound that growth for the death benefit. So, if you're 70 years old and they're going to roll up your death benefit by 6% a year, just as an example, to your age 80, but you end up living to be age 90, now you got to look at that and say, okay, well, I got that 6% roll up for 10 years, but I lived another 10 years past that. And then what does that compounded rate of return stretch out to be for those, for that death benefit? So again, I'm not a really big fan of that, but you want to understand how that works if death benefit was a primary reason. And there are some long-term care benefits that they could make sense, but I would look at those more as an ancillary benefit, not as a primary reason for buying the annuity. So if you bought that primarily for the long-term care benefit, that's something really needs to get evaluated, make sure that still makes sense for you and your situation. Okay, so now let's start talking about some of your options that you have with this annuity. There's really 4 primary options that you have with an annuity that you already own. Number 1 is just to do nothing. So you've gone through all of the work, you've evaluated the other annuities that are out there, you've evaluated your current annuity, and basically you came up with the determination that what you have is really pretty good. There's no reason to change that annuity. So simply do nothing. Number 2 is that if you do find an annuity that's better than yours, maybe it has a better interest rate, maybe it could potentially pay you higher income. Maybe there's a better principal protection or lower fees. Whatever the reason, you can do something called a 1035 exchange. And what that allows you to do is to basically exchange one annuity for another. And we're going to talk again about some of the considerations before making this, but you want to make sure that there's no fees involved with that. If there's surrender penalties for getting out of your existing annuity, pretty much no matter how good that new annuity is, it's going to be hard to justify paying some of those surrender penalties to get out of that annuity. Your third option is to just simply cash out of the annuity. Now, a couple of very important things to consider here. Number 1, obviously, we talked about surrender penalties. Again, if there's surrender penalties, this is probably not an option that makes sense. If we're talking about an annuity that's outside of your retirement accounts, remember, you're going to have to pay taxes on any of the gains in that annuity. Basically, you put in, let's say, $100,000. Now that's worth $130,000. If you cashed out the entire thing, you're going to have to pay taxes on that $30,000. And again, just like we talked about earlier, it's going to be taxed at your ordinary income tax bracket. That's your highest federal marginal tax rate. So be very careful about that. If it's inside of an IRA account, however, you can cash out of that annuity, and as long as the money stays in an IRA, whether it's a traditional or a Roth, you don't have to pay any taxes on the sale of that annuity. So again, and doing all of that evaluation, if you just simply decided that, hey, I no longer need that income benefit or death benefit or whatever it may be, that same investment objective doesn't apply to me anymore, anymore, then you can just simply cash out of the annuity. Maybe there's a better option for you to invest that money, maybe even a cheaper option. So number 3 is to just simply cash out of the annuity. The fourth option that you have with an annuity that you already own is to keep your annuity but do something different with it. And I think this is a big one that a lot of people might actually fall into. So again, you're going to evaluate your annuity, you're going to make sure that meets your investment objective, and maybe you decided that, hey, I need an income benefit, and we never added an income benefit. So with a lot of annuity companies, you may be able to add that on as an additional rider. Now, it's probably going to be a fee involved with that, but if that makes sense, you may be best off to do that within an existing annuity that you already own, rather than going out and buying a brand new annuity. The second thing that you might want to do as you're evaluating this annuity is look at the investment options that you have within that, especially if we're talking about a fixed indexed annuity. Maybe you chose the S&P 500 as the benchmark index, but maybe there's a better index within that annuity that might give you a better return potential or has better risk and return characteristics. If you have a variable annuity, I think this is a very big one that's out there, because usually these variable annuities have a whole menu of investment options. And especially if you haven't reviewed this annuity in a while, or you set that up a long time ago, you may find that there's better investment options, or investment options that you think you just have better potential or better asset allocation than what you already have. So those are the things that you want to look at. Keep that annuity, and maybe you can do something different. If you're interested in a death benefit, maybe that's something that could be added on. So you really want to understand the existing annuity, what you have, and what changes you have available to you within that existing annuity. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about here as it pertains to evaluating your annuity is I want to talk about some final considerations before you make any changes or cash out of your annuity, or even do an exchange into a new annuity. So one thing we've talked about here already are the surrender penalties. Now, pretty much every annuity that exists has some sort of a surrender schedule. So usually it could be anywhere from 5 years to 7 years, could even be longer than that. And during that period of time, you're going to be limited to only taking out 10% of what you put into the annuity. If you take out more than that, in other words, if you cash out or completely exchange your annuity, you could be hit with some very steep surrender penalties. And like I said earlier, it usually does not make sense to pay those surrender penalties, even if it means you're going to get a better income benefit or death benefit or better investment options. So paying those surrender penalties very rarely makes sense. Number 2 are fees, and I think this is a big one. So you want to first of all understand the fees that you're paying on your existing annuity. If you go back to some of those other videos that I've recorded, I get in very detailed analysis on the different fees that you might experience in those annuities. A variable annuity, as an example, can have 3 or even 4 layers of fees inside your annuity. So you want to make sure you understand those fees, and also too, if you're making a change, hopefully in that process you're going to be reducing the fees that you're paying. So that's going to be a big one, but understand the fees on your existing annuity versus what those fees are on your new annuity. The third thing that you want to consider here are the growth potential of your annuity. So this might be fairly simple if we're talking about a fixed annuity. If we're talking about an indexed annuity, you want to understand the crediting methods that are being used for getting those interest payments and what index that's being tied to, and looking at the performance of the index. If we're talking about a variable annuity, you want to understand what those options are within that annuity, what's been the past track record or performance history of some of those funds. You also want to look at any restrictions that might be placed on those portfolios. So one very common thing that you might see inside of a variable annuity is some limitations on how much money you can have, let's say, in stocks and bonds. So because they're maybe giving you some of these income benefits, they might say you can only have X% in the stock market, and most of your money might be designated to be allocated in the bond market. So you want to really understand that. There's also some automatic algorithms that sometimes exist within these annuities, where even if you set it up and said, hey, I want a portfolio that's 75% stocks and 25% bonds, if the stock market starts going in the opposite direction, your annuity might automatically shift money over into the bond market. It might be very difficult for that money to go back. So you really want to understand, how those monies are being allocated and what that algorithm is for any automatic shifts that might be happening within the annuity, and what those growth potentials are, quite honestly. So next, I want to talk about the living benefits that you might have on some of these annuities. And I think this is a very big one. So we talked about this a little bit earlier, especially as it pertains to a variable annuity. So you might have had an annuity. Let's just use an example here. Let's say you put $100,000 into an annuity. Let's say that it's worth $140,000 today. What you oftentimes might find is that through an automatic compounding of what they call your benefit base, you could have a future benefit base that might be $200,000. And what that means is that any income that you take out of the portfolio is going to be based off of that higher amount. Now let's say, for example, that your annuity was going to pay you a guaranteed 5% off of that benefit base. So now on $200,000, you could get a $10,000 annual income that hopefully is guaranteed for the rest of your life. And sometimes it might even be guaranteed as long as you're alive and your spouse is alive. So if you cashed out of that annuity, remember, you're not walking away with that $200,000. You're only walking away with $140,000 of your current account value. And so on one hand, you've got $10,000 of guaranteed income. If you took $140,000 and you invested it in something else, even another annuity, it's probably going to be very difficult for you to get $10,000 a year of income out of that annuity and still have that money last you for the rest of your life. So you really want to understand how those living benefits might work. And you might be looking at that saying, hey, I put $100,000 in, it's only worth $140,000. I want to get out of this, but not fully understanding what that future income benefit might pay out. So you want to understand that. And finally, the last thing we want to look at here are some of those other benefits there, the death benefits and a long-term care benefit. Again, you want to evaluate, make sure you understand how those benefits work. You want to decide, hey, do I even still want or need that benefit? And is there a better potential way that I could accomplish that objective through either another annuity or through something else? So that's the final consideration there when looking at evaluating this annuity. So anyway, lots of information there. I hope this has been helpful for you. I hope you got some great details, but you still might have some additional questions. So we're going to have a link here right below the video. If you click on that, it's going to give you some options. You can schedule a free introductory call with me. You can ask me those questions that you have about your annuity directly. We also have something called Annuity Intelligence. And what we can do is we can take an existing annuity that you already own and we can provide a complete analysis of that annuity. We can go through, explain to you the fees, the surrender schedules, the investment options, all of the details regarding that annuity and help you make a good, confident decision on whether or not that annuity still makes sense for you or maybe some sort of a change makes sense. And if keeping that annuity is what makes the most sense, we're going to tell you, hey, that annuity is fine. It's going to accomplish your goal and we think you should keep that annuity, or hey, you should keep the annuity, but here's a couple of suggestions that you can have. Maybe you're not properly allocated within the annuity, or there's some other options that could be a little bit better, or there's a benefit that could be added on. We're going to tell you all that, very unbiased, but click on that link below. We can schedule a free time to talk and help you decide what to do with that annuity that you own. So anyway, hope you liked the video. Don't forget to hit that like or subscribe button. Share this video if you're out on social media, because we'd love to get the word out and have other people become more financially educated. Thanks, and I'll see you back in my next video.